As far as maritime security in Africa is concerned, we're really talking about fish first and foremost. In fact, when the piracy off the coast of Somalia became a big thing back in the early 2000s, a journalist actually got a hold of one of the pirates and asked him the question, "Why are you doing this?" That was basically the question the journalist asked. "Why are you doing this?" And the pirate articulated an argument. He basically said, "Look, you have the whole world coming to our waters and stealing our fish just because we don't have a Coast Guard. So we have to do something about it. We have to protect our resources." Of course, it was a bit of a subterfuge. It was a bit of a convenient explanation, but he articulated an interesting point. It's fish. If you were to ask our friends in West Africa, what is your, and I have a slide on this, what is the major concern you have? They'll reply, IUU. IUU is simply illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. There are all sorts of foreign vessels sitting right there and just stealing Africans' fish. He's taping me, so I cannot name too many names as to who's, there's a country that has basically a fifth of its fishing fleet sitting in the Gulf of Guinea. And they're not there for tourism. So illegal fishing is really the key thing as far as Africans are concerned for important reasons. The food security of about 200 million Africans depends on fish. So no fish, no food security for about 200 million Africans. Much of their animal protein intake is from fish. So that makes it very, very, very important. Some of the other issues that some of my colleagues already covered. Look at piracy. Piracy is not at the very top of the Africans' list of priorities. It's fairly close to the bottom. It's, again, another mistake, another one of the strategic mistakes that I was talking about. They basically feel that, look, this is an international issue. This is an international issue. When the piracy off the coast of Somalia started, Africans did not respond at all. Not one single ship was sent to the Horn of Africa to help the international efforts to deal with the piracy issue. Not one. And it's not because Africans do not have the assets. South Africa has a bit of a navy. Nigeria has a bit of a navy. Some of the North African countries have resources. They do not. They do not. And we can talk about this a bit more in more detail. As I was saying, Africa loses a tremendous amount of money on illegal fishing. $1 billion per year, very conservative estimates. I'll show you another slide in a minute. This $1 billion is just one of these figures that academics came up with. No one actually went out there and tabulated everything. It was an estimate, a rough estimate, about $1 billion. But recently, and this, by the way, is not an academic research. It's mainly journalistic research. That they estimate, and I need to, the source is right there, the Pew Research Trust. They estimate that just West Africa, $7.1 billion losses. So for about a decade, we've been saying $1 billion a year, $1 billion a year, $1 billion a year. No, that's a massive underestimate. Just from West Africa, it's about 7 times that much.
You gave away your nameless country.
I did?
On the slide.
Is that?
It's held dead.
Why is it nameless? Political reasons?
Well, political reasons. There's. I don't want.
This is non-attribution.
This is not attribution, but he's gonna put this on YouTube or something like that. The whole world is gonna watch it. I don't want to get myself or my government in trouble. So yeah, I give it away. Remove that slide. just human smuggling, as some of my previous colleagues are saying, also a big issue. Very, very, very big problem. And Africa is in, pretty much the epicenter of it. And again, the importance of the maritime is that a lot of it goes, the highways are basically maritime highways. So you have human smuggling, and this is basically an Africa-wide issue. You have very well-established routes, currently all going up north to make that hop into Europe. Again, all of it, really bringing the maritime domain to the very center of our attention. And the problem the Europeans are realizing now is something that we've been saying for a long time. The issue of MDA, maritime domain awareness, was basically, well, it still is by and large non-existent in Africa. Africans do not control their maritime space, plain and simple. They do not control it because they do not patrol it. They don't have anybody. They don't have the mechanisms. They don't have the tools to patrol their waters, to see what's going on in their maritime domain. So therefore, anybody, any entrepreneur who wants to trade in human cargo can do that. Can do that all around the continent. Just some of the routes to make the point that it's not just coming out of West Africa, it's coming from East Africa, and they're all kind of converging up north. And these routes are very, very well known. Trafficking in persons as well. Big money. Big money. Worldwide is about $32 billion. Again, this is a very conservative estimate. And Africans, good business people that they are, they want to get a cut on that money. Okay? And again, the highways are maritime highways. Narcotics. We talked about this a little bit. The important graph, and Luisa is going to distribute all the slides. The important slide is actually this one, because the old drugs route would go straight from, say, Colombia to Europe. The new route, it's a bit more indirect. It's a bit more indirect. You go into West Africa first. A lot of people are talking about Guinea-Bissau, but it's not just Guinea-Bissau. It's not just Guinea-Bissau. The west coast of Africa is being penetrated from Angola to Senegal. From Angola to Senegal. I was in Senegal not too long ago with a friend of mine. I have all sorts of buddies in naval forces around the world, really. So I'm driving around the car with this Navy captain, and he was saying, look at these houses, look at these houses, and he was asking me, well, we are a poor country by and large. Where do you think the money comes from to buy these mansions, to build these mansions? Of course, we were talking about drugs and the penetration of illicit drugs into Senegal. So that's a big issue in Senegal and in other parts of Africa as well. Piracy is an issue. Piracy is an issue that the Africans are not paying sufficient attention to, but it's a big security challenge. And we try to convey the point to them that, look, this is not just an international community issue, and you know, the international community includes Africa as well. If trade is hindered, if navigation around the world is impeded by pirates, everybody suffers. Everybody suffers. And Africa, because it's more vulnerable than many other parts of the world, of course, will suffer in a disproportionate way. And one of the things that we drive home is the connection between piracy and governance. Piracy and governance. And this is something that Dr. Siegel was talking about yesterday as well. There's a very direct connection between piracy and governance. We saw that in Somalia. What really brought the piracy issue what enabled the piracy issue in Somalia was the collapse of the state. No state, no government, well, you have piracy taking place. So the issue of the state, if you have a strong state, if you have a functioning state, chances are that you probably will not have pirates. You probably will not have pirates. However, if you have corruption, if you have weak law enforcement, if you have endemic poverty, if your citizens don't have much hope, and if you are a littoral country, chances are that some of those citizens will become criminals and operate in the water. And this is basically what is happening on the other side of Africa, and we're going to come to that in a second. But yesterday somebody asked the question, why is it that piracy in the Horn of Africa has been basically eliminated, done with, ended? It took a lot of effort on the part of the international community, led by the United States, the European Union, NATO. It was really all of them working together. You have four operations off the Horn of Africa. This is absolutely massive. The Europeans have their Operation Atalanta. NATO has Operation Ocean Shield. The United States has, is that 151, Combined Task Force 151. And you have an assorted players there, from Russia to China to India. You really have a very robust presence in the Horn of Africa. And that's the reason why basically the pirates are hibernating. This is really the reason why the pirates are out of business. Industry also responded because they listened to the security specialists who were telling them, hey, look, make life a little harder for the pirates because your ships are a bit too vulnerable. Take some precautionary measures. And industry responded, and they've deployed all sorts of improvements to really prevent the pirates from actually hijacking as many ships. There's a bit of a militarization of many ships. Some people have had raised concerns about that. What are the consequences of having so many guards on ships? Well, after about 10 years, I think we can say, well, the results are positive. The results are positive in the sense that the armed guards were not, a few years back, people were saying, well, there will be a proliferation of weapons, there will be this, there will be that. Nothing like that really happened. What has happened is that discouraged the pirates from actually taking over a lot of those ships. Now, to the other side of Africa, big problem. And this problem is just starting. On the other side of Africa, the problem is just starting. You have a state, and it goes back to governance. You have a state in that region that's that has many governance challenges. Many governance challenges. You have a state where much of the wealth comes from a certain region, and that particular region is the poorest region. And it's from that region where most of the criminals are coming from to really disrupt a lot of commerce, not just localized but regionalized. You understand that pirates in the West Coast have hijacked ships all the way south to Angola. You know, it's quite incredible. So the area is quite large. It's not just the Niger Delta. It's not just Nigeria. It's not just Nigeria and Cameroon. It's the whole of the Gulf of Guinea, and that is a big problem. It's important for Africa because there's the economic dimension of piracy, of armed robbery at sea. I remember in, I believe it was in 2010, Benin was really hurting because of a few piracy incidents just off the port of Cotonou. Because the port of Cotonou is so very critical to the economy of Benin, if there's no ships coming into the port of Cotonou, that economy collapses. And I clearly remember President Boni Yayi coming to the United States and basically asking for help. Please come and help me because I'm hurting. The United States did respond. Other countries did respond. Nigeria responded with Operation Prosperity. And that problem was alleviated a little bit. There's also the terrorism dimension of maritime security. And this is something that from attacks on vessels to oil platforms, and more importantly, the potential of using the seas, using the oceans and the seas as conduits for terrorist devices. It's a big issue. It's a big issue. There are some agencies that are beginning to think about that, but I think a lot more work needs to be done there. Now, let me just take a few minutes to talk about the United States and how the United States is supporting maritime security in Africa. From my perspective, this is one of the big success stories as far as security cooperation between the United States and Africa is concerned. It's a huge success story, and not too many people know about it. When the piracy issues in Somalia began to really capture the world's attention, the United States responded there operationally, but anticipated similar problems on the other side, on the west coast of Africa, and responded there strategically. That was very smart, very smart. You know, whoever was sitting somewhere and devised that strategy was very clever, because had we not done that, what you're seeing in the Gulf of Guinea today will probably be about 10 times worse. Of course, it's hard to prove a negative, but it will be about 10 times worse. What has the United States done? The United States has responded in the Gulf of Guinea mainly at the strategic level by helping the African states set up a maritime security architecture for the whole entire region, from Senegal in the north to Angola in the south, bringing together two regional economic communities, ECAS in Central Africa and ECOWAS in West Africa. The United States focused on those two wrecks because that's where the action was anticipated to be. Of course, the United States did not neglect to support the African Union, But keep in mind that the African Union doesn't really have much of an operational role when it comes to maritime security. It is the regions and it's the nation states that really have that operational role. So the United States helped to provide the African Union basically the African Union put together the chapeau, the umbrella strategy, AIMS 2050. The AIM stands for African Integrated Maritime Strategy. The United States also provided support for ECOWAS to develop their own regional maritime strategy. But more importantly, the United States supported what's called the Yaoundé process. The Yaoundé process. The Yaoundé process is called that because it was the culmination in Yaoundé in June 2013. 23 heads of state came together and they signed an agreement. They signed an agreement to work together. Collective security applied to the maritime domain of Central and West Africa.